במקרה בדוק. ידוע. זה רק ב10 שנים האחרונות
יאללה, בוא נתחיל. Yeah, we're not tzedakah. So there are 4 psukim which are connected to the mitzvah tzedakah. One mitzvah pasuk is le'sa'am mitzvah zavavcha, you shouldn't hold your heart back. Le'sik mitzvah yadcha, you shouldn't hold your hand back. V'seach tiftach, those are negative. Don't hold your heart back, don't hold your hand back. There's 2 psukim which are positive. V'seach tiftach, open up your hand. Nas and titin, you give shall you give. So that's the source in the Torah for 2 positive mitzvahs, 2 negative mitzvahs, mitzvah tzedakah. And this is the source for all Hilchos Tzedakah from in the Shulchan Aruch, from Reish Mem Vav until Reish Mem Tes. And I was watching a great class today from Rabbi Oberlander from Muncie on Hilchos Tzedakah, but it's in Yiddish. I can't really post it, but I could try to translate it. So it says about a few mitzvahs, it's used the expression, a double expression, mo'oid, mo'oid. You should be very, very careful about them. It says
talking about the you said that you have to do it to say it really with kavanah, and if you don't say it with kavanah, you have to say it again.
Right. Also, Master, I sent you a video today of the gem video with you. I sent someone else who had the challenge of the same things on Maple on 9th. Really appreciate it. Get a lot of chayes from it. Anyways, so there's a few places in the Torah that use the expression ma'oid, ma'oid. One of them is regarding the laws of interest. Other is regarding the laws of immorality, and also regarded to bribery. And the 4th place, laws of tzedakah. The reason we have to be so careful with tzedakah is because it says if you're not careful with tzedakah, sometimes you could be transgressing the prohibition of murder. The guy needs money right now to buy food. You don't give him food, don't give him money for food. So therefore, there's an additional stringency about tzedakah. Come join us. Or go out, choose. Invar unvar. Okay. Says the Gemara, a person never becomes poor because of tzedakah, and no one had any damage. No one was ever hurt because of tzedakah. Because as in the Torah of Ahoya Mais at tzedakah Shalim, the deed of tzedakah is called peace, and therefore it's impossible the person giving tzedakah is going to be hurt. It says, Kol merachem on all of anyone who has rachmanis on others, Hashem has rachmanis on them. If you have rachmanis on those who need rachmanis, Hashem has rachmanis on you. The Ramah says a person should pay attention to how we all need Hashem's help. We all turn to Hashem all the time. And just like we're turning to Hashem, so Hashem responds to us the way we treat others. So if we're asking Hashem for help, we also have to pay attention to who asks us for help. We want Hashem to answer us. We're always asking for Rachmanis. We have to also have Rachmanis and turn to those who are seeking our help. The Gemara says, this is probably the source of the expression of the Wheel of Fortune. Gemara says that there's a Wheel of Fortune, a Galgal Chesed Ve'elam, and therefore a person should always daven for financial assistance from Hashem, because it says in Gemara, if you will need assistance, Chas v'shalom, your son, your grandson, there's always it's a wheel and it always turns, and therefore, if you have Rachmanis on others, you cause Hashem's Rachmanis for yourself, and therefore it's something we should need to be especially careful about. Famous teaching of the Gemara, we all heard before, tzedakah saves from death. By the way, that's why it's customary, Chas v'shalom, after a funeral, you're supposed to give tzedakah, because tzedakah tatzim lavis. The Rebbe said that we should, whenever we give tzedakah, not wherever we give tzedakah, but from time to time give tzedakah, you should think about learn the teaching of the Gemara, how tzedakah brings Mashiach, tzedakah brings Karas Segula, of all the mitzvahs, one that's most potent in bringing Mashiach is a mitzvah of tzedakah, like Alter explains in Lent and Tanya, because every mitzvah you do elevates something of the world to Kedusha. But tzedakah elevates so much more, because in order to earn that money, you have to exert yourself, you have to use so much of your time and your day to get the money. And therefore, when you give the money to tzedakah, Alter said you're giving chayin nashel avaya. You're giving your life itself to Hashem. First of all, because you could use that money to buy food, but also because in order to earn that money, you put yourself into earning that money. And therefore, when you give it away, Alter said you're elevating so much of the world. and therefore preparing the world for the Geula, when the light of Hashem will fill the world. Each mitzvah elevates something, but tzedakah elevates so much more.
What if you have a windfall and you don't know the value of a dollar and you're giving a tremendous amount of money away to people, but it's not really your blood, sweat, and tears? You just did it big.
So Alter Rebbe says, still, when you give something, you could use that money to buy food. Alter Rebbe says, "Neisun chai nafsha avai." You're giving your life itself to Hashem, because with each dollar you could buy yourself a bagel.
Even if you don't know that you don't know the value of the dollar.
As I'm saying you're still giving away something which could sustain and nourish you. The Chinuch says something very interesting. Doesn't the Torah, you should not feel bad when you give it to the person who's asking for help. So the Sefer Chinuch says this is unique. Every mitzvah we know we're supposed to be b'simcha, serve Hashem b'simcha, not just when you're doing a mitzvah, even you're eating and drinking. But what's unique about the mitzvah of tzedakah is it says that the simcha is part of the mitzvah. It's not just that you're supposed to be b'simcha, you're serving Hashem, and one of the ways of serving Hashem is tzedakah. It says, Sefer Chinuch says specifically about tzedakah, it says you shouldn't feel bad while you're giving. It's part of the mitzvah of tzedakah is to feel good. It's a component of the mitzvah of tzedakah itself. The Ramah has interesting notes on the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, it says that with the mitzvah that you're allowed to test Hashem, as we've heard before, that Hashem is going to respond to you and pay you back. The only mitzvah you're allowed to do that is with the mitzvah of tzedakah. Mitzvah of tzedakah, but the mechaber, the Rebbeis of Cairo qualifies and says it's not just giving tzedakah, it's when you give meiser. And the Ramah says which meiser ksafim. In other words, there are some opinions, many who disagree with the Ramah and say, when can you be sure that Hashem will give you, make you rich? Hashem will make you rich when you give 10% of your crop to charity. But the Ramah clearly qualifies and says that stafka, the mitzvah of meiser, 10% of your earnings to tzedakah, meiser ksafim, not the mitzvah meiser from tvua, not just 10% of your crops, but 10% of your money. You give 10% of your earnings to tzedakah. That is what brings the bracha of Hashem for wealth. And since the Ramah paskins like this is not just a psaktin over here, this is a psaktin of Hashem. And therefore, it's a halacha. Hashem follows halacha, right? So Yid gives tzedakah, gives 10% of his earnings to tzedakah. So the psak din that the Eibush has to make them rich. You're supposed to. Hashem says, please test me. There's actually one Jew who was in the Yechidus by the Rebbe. Rabbi Reichel always say the story how this Jew was in the Yechidus, and the Rebbe asked him if he gave meiser. And he told the Rebbe, no. So the Rebbe said, if you give meiser, I could go to Rabbi Yechanan, and they would put out a Gemara. And Rabbi Yechanan says in the Torah, aser to aser. Rabbi Yechanan says, aser b'shutas shetas asher, give 10% to become rich. He said, if you would have done this, I could have asked Rabbi Yechanan to intervene on your behalf. Whereas Ami has a famous story that with Ami, with Miri Sassoon, kick jeans, right? He brought him to the Rebbe. Huh?
Now I remember.
He brought him to the Rebbe. You correct me if I'm saying it wrong.
The Rebbe told him he should he asked him if he
Make him a
gave
partner.
10%. And then he told him, I didn't have the money, like people stole the money. So the Rebbe was asking if he has the money, if he gave. So I asked him, Boris, הרבי שואל אם היה לך דולר בכיס, נתת 10 סנט בזה.
בחייתק.
אז הוא הסתכל לרבי, אמר לו, רבי, בחייתק, מה שאתה אומר אני עושה.
By your life, I swear to you, I'll do whatever you say.
Then the Rebbe called me, and he told me what you say now. I didn't know about this many years. He said, if you're going to give 10%, and you're not going to get, you have a taina, and then he told me this, what did you say, Rabbi Yohanan? And I didn't know about this. I came many years later to Israel, in Jerusalem, and I said, and I say this. The rabbi went, he took the Gemara, and he opened it for me, and he told me that's what the Rebbe told you, and then it said there,
oh, we're missing part of the story. What you told me the story last time was, the Rebbe said he should give 12%, to make sure he's giving 10%.
Say he should make 10% and he should add another 2%, which he never make a mistake. That's what he told me.
Make sure not make a mistake.
Sure he didn't make a mistake.
And the Rebbe said, "Maftiach lo."
And 2 weeks
before
Pesach, he became a partner with somebody which gave him $33 million.
Oh, there's a promise of a change for Pesach. Starts keeping care from now on. The promise of a change will be changed for Pesach. And so now it's not called Kicket Jeans. Mir Sassoon, it's called Kick It, whatever. I don't remember the whole Kick Mir Sassoon. All right. So So why don't make a bracha in this mitzvah? It's such a big mitzvah. It's a mitzvah, it's a biblical commandment. Jew needs help, giving tzedakah. Why don't you say a bracha? So one opinion is, Rashba says, the reason we don't say a bracha is because you're not sure you can do the mitzvah. You want to give. I said I want to take. So you can't do the mitzvah. So you can't say a bracha. A bracha will only be on something that's up to you to do the mitzvah. Here it's dependent on the other person to take, and therefore you can't say a bracha. The Avud Raham says, by saying a bracha, you're sort of celebrating another person's misfortune. Thank you, Hashem. Here is my mitzvah. He doesn't want to be your mitzvah. So therefore, you can't say a bracha because it's celebrating another person's misfortune. What about a tzedakah box? Tzedakah box don't have these problems. Tzedakah box, you put it in, and it'll go towards helping somebody, not this person, help somebody. Why can't you say a bracha? So there actually was, Rabbi Chassid said that there was someone, he said in the name of someone who was named Rabbi Yo, who was one of the Rishonim, one of the early codifiers of commentaries in the Talmud, who actually would make a bracha. He had stuck. You say a bracha for giving stuck. So, okay. So, you give tzedakah to Moisés? Yeah. So these two reasons don't exist, and yet you still cannot. Customs you don't say a bracha. Institution or to a charity box. In a charity box, you don't have these two issues, but still you can't get. There is an argument in general among Pesachim whether mitzvah of Meiser is specifically to someone who's needy, or is mitzvah of tzedakah also be given to others. And the halachas can give them to others as well, not just to also be given to a shul. It's not only those who are in need, but there's an argument in the Ramah and the Taz. Anyways, so there's four psukim, two positive mitzvahs, two negative commandments, and therefore we have to be really careful because someone asks for help and you don't respond. So you're dealing with two positive mitzvahs and two negative mitzvahs.
Very interesting thing about that. It says that we judge very harshly if someone, asks for money and they're deserving and you don't give. Yeah. And so what mitigates against that is when someone who doesn't deserve, right, and you give, not saying that you should give it so it should go up their veins, but
I heard him say once that in 770 there's a lot of people collecting tzedakah. He said because of the amount of people which are not real, so if you want to be mahadir in mitzvahs, then give a nickel. But he said they're not really obligated, as Rabbi Azba said. But the important thing though is to realize is that that's when you know the person isn't if you don't know. But if there is a person who actually does need and you're not responding to them, you're transgressing these four commandments. What about if someone doesn't ask? They're home and they need for Shabbos, and you were able to give them, and they didn't ask. So there are those who say that this commandment only applies to someone who's really destitute, who's hungry, has no clothing. Then there's a mitzvah. Then you're violating the commandment. But or if someone is going door to door asking for help, some people say, Shulchan Aruch says, if a poor person is knocking on everyone's door, so you're not responsible to satisfy all of his needs because the guy is going to other people. You're not concerned that he's going to be left empty-handed, not getting what he needs because quite a lot. He already knows a way to earn money without you. So therefore, you're not responsible to completely alleviate his issue. You should give him something, but you have to give him something. But you're not responsible to it's totally his responsibility. Your responsibility. Conversely, someone is embarrassed to ask, is not able to go door to door, and they need help, and you're able to help them. So that's a different story. It's more an obligation to help someone who is not able to go door to door, but whether it's because they're embarrassed, whatever reason may be. Some people say if the guy doesn't ask, you're only transgressing the positive commandment. You're not transgressing on the negative commandment. Okay. So the Torah says, "Lo yisa amitz levach." You can't hold your heart back. What that means is you're not allowed to let the guy turn around and be empty-handed. As the Torah says, "Al yashuv dach nichlam." Do not allow this person who is poor to be ashamed. You're not allowed to leave the person empty-handed. And even more, even if he doesn't ask, but you know he needs, you're still transgressing a commandment. You know he needs. He didn't ask you, but you know he needs. You're still transgressing a commandment. Don't hold your heart back. Let's say there is a general fund that helps people in town who are in need, and you don't participate in this fund. You're also transgressing this negative commandment. the Ramah says, well, how much you have to give? You give something, a gregris, you give something, an amount of bread, but you have to give something. The pashtus, in a simple sense, a Jew knocks on your door, you have to give him something. Chaim Kanievsky says that if you give him less than a shava pruta, you give him less than a coin of, so you're not transgressing a negative commandment, you're just not doing a mitzvah's assay. It says you can't leave him empty-handed. So you did open your hand, you didn't give him anything substantial, so you're only transgressing the positive commandment, not the negative commandment. Okay. A gabay tzedakah, someone is going on behalf of someone else, and they're collecting tzedakah. So on the one hand, you don't have the problem of embarrassing the poor person because he's not coming up knocking on your door. On the other hand, if the guy was sent specifically to ask you, and Shulchan Shalom Kamei, the emissary, the person like the person himself, so he was sent to ask you, so you have an obligation to give him as if he was the person who sent him, as if he was a needy person himself. There is a mitzvah in the Torah, Baal Ta'acher. Baal Ta'acher means you're not allowed to delay a pledge for the time of 3 Yom Tov. That means if you give a donation before on Rosh Hashanah, you decide you want to buy a new parechas for the shul, so you can't wait the time of 3 Yom Tov before giving the parechas. That Torah says you're not delay giving stuff. What if you have $20 and you want to give this to people who need? So here it's different. You have to give it right away because there are people who need it right away, and therefore, if someone needs it, and you're holding on to it. It's not, you can't wait 3 Yom Tovim. For a donation to a shul, you can wait 3 Yom Tovim. But a donation for people in need, there are always people that need, and therefore, by delaying it, you're immediately transgressing the commandment of Al Ta'acher. Rebbe brings from, who was it? I forgot who it was, one of the Rishonim Achin, who says a person should have a special wallet, a special fund for tzedakah. So you always, Masas Ben Yamin maybe it was, should always have something ready to give tzedakah.
It makes life a lot easier.
Okay.
No, because then you don't have to sit and calculate this. You deserve it, doesn't deserve it. Do I have, do I don't have? You have it, you give it out.
What if a woman is home and someone knocks on the door and asks this lady for tzedakah? So the halacha is they're only allowed to accept from women and children a small amount of money because the question is whether she has permission from her husband to give. And even if her husband is a very stingy person, it's still his money. You can't steal it. So if she gives more than a small amount of money, so we assume that the husband gave her permission to give. If it's a large amount of money, it's a Kailingaman, and she's giving away $200. Chances are that it's not okay. Therefore, it says you're allowed to accept from a woman, from a child, a small amount of money to tzedakah, but not a large amount. There's a concept called oisik mitzvah pater mitzvah. Someone who's involved in a mitzvah is exempt from a mitzvah. What if you're in the middle of davening and someone comes over to ask you for tzedakah? So the Mishnah Berurah says, in the middle of davening, you're not obligated to give anyone tzedakah. You're in the middle of davening. What's the middle of davening? Some people say it's after Shemona Esrei. Some people say it's also after Shemona Esrei. Some people say the Pesuk of Zimra, you have to get stuck at that point. But either way, the Rebbe actually said that I heard the tape once. Rebbe said that people like us, or put himself in the category of everybody else, that when someone comes over to you with a tzedakah pushka in the middle of davening, and you're giving him tzedakah, it's going to disturb your concentration. And therefore, although it says in Kabbalah you're supposed to get stuck about the Mashav HaKel when you're in the middle of Vayevar David, they ever said that it disturbs concentration, and you don't have to give tzedakah specifically at that point of davening.
What if the guy's going to go out of shul? What if you know he needs it?
So, if you say that you're involved in a mitzvah, and so you're exempt, you want to be mahad, you want to be extra careful, you want to take care of this person, okay? But the question is, are you obligated or not? So you're saying that you don't care if you're obligated. You want to help this guy out. So you're like the Samach Tzedek, who says who made sure that even though it was before davening, you ran out to the guy, gave him a loan because you knew what the guy needed it. We're talking about the halacha obligation is mitzvah. You're involved in a mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. Okay, how much you're supposed to give to tzedakah? So the language of Shulchan Aruch is, believe it or not, this is the language of Shulchan Aruch. As much as is needed, if the person needs, that's how much you have to give. Because if you can't afford it, you can't afford to satisfy everybody's needs. Okay, so it says you should give up to a fifth. Up to a fifth is a mitzvah and a mochar. There is a famous teaching that was said in the city of Usha. Shouldn't give more than a fifth. It sounds like you're not allowed to give more than a fifth. Some people say, then when it says you shouldn't give more than a fifth, it actually means you're not allowed to give more than a fifth. Some people say, some tzaddikim, some commentaries on the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch say it means this is the top, this is the highest level of tzedakah. But we always want to be able to give more because we're great by tzedakah. So it says in Tanya that if a person has made a mistake in their life, they're allowed to give more than a fifth, because just like you give more than a fifth of your earnings to help your health, to pay for a doctor, you wouldn't reckon with how much money it is because you need to get you healthy. How much more so, says Alter Rebbe, to help your neshama, how much more so would you give more than a fifth? The Baal Shem Tov says the word mevazves comes from the word spoils of war. If it's a fight and you hate doing it, then Shulchan Aruch says, okay, relax. We're only going to take a fifth. You're doing it with simcha, Baal Shem Tov says you ought to give far more than a fifth. But according to the simple language of Shulchan Aruch, if you can afford it, you have to give according to the need of the person. It doesn't matter if it's a fifth or more. Because if you can afford it, then you should only give a fifth. The Shittim Betzis says that that it's permissible, and that's what it sounds like Shulchan Aruch as well. The Chassam Sofer says that. If someone's very wealthy, so they're allowed to give more than a fifth. Chassam Sofer says to your parents, you also give more than a fifth. Your parents need help, you ought to give more than a fifth. It's mashma. Giving to your parents who are in need. That's tzedakah. In fact, that's the first mitzvah of tzedakah, because you're supposed to give to your relatives before you give to your city, and people in the city before people in a different city. The Chavetz Chaim says if you have a job and you get a certain paycheck every month, so Chavetz Chaim says you're not in the category of someone who's prohibited to give more than a fifth. Why is it prohibited to give more than a fifth? Because you end up needing tzedakah yourself. Don't bring yourself to a situation you're going to end up needing yourself. So the Chavetz Chaim says if you have a set paycheck, you know you're not going to be in trouble next month because you know what your paycheck is, and therefore you can give in advance of what you're going to get next month as well. That's what Rebbe Weissel will show us. Always give money in advance of money he's going to make in years ahead. The Rambam says in Pirush Mishnayos, himself the Beitza, that a rich person is obligated to give a fifth of tzedakah. Someone who has more than he needs he's allowed to, but he has to give. That's what Rambam says. Some people say that the Shulchan Aruch, it sounds like you're not allowed to give more than a fifth, but either way, based on all these scenarios that we mentioned, and it says in Tanya, you're allowed to give more. It says in Shulchan Aruch, when you give, how are you supposed to give? It says you're supposed to give with a happy face, with joy, and you're supposed to empathize with the guy who needs. And if chas v'sholom, you don't empathize, and you look down, your face is down, you look upset at doing it, it says you lost the entire merit of what you're doing. And it says you have to, if you don't have anything on you, you have to appease him to make the guy feel good. You can't help him, at least make him feel good. Actually, it says in Shulchan Aruch, it says in Gemara that when you give someone tzedakah, if you give him with positive words, you merit 11 brachas. Why 11? So Chassidus says every person has 10 spheres. 11 represents the infinite. In order to really empathize with somebody, to really feel where they are, it's impossible. The only way you can feel where another person is if you go in the level of 11. You go beyond nature. If you go with the way Mesiras Nefesh, and you let go of yourself, then you can really empathize with that person. That's why it says you get 11 brachas specifically when you empathize with the other person. So Torah says you have to give the person whatever they need. Give the person what they need. So Rambam says whether he's missing, he's not married, he's missing, he doesn't have a horse, or nowadays doesn't have a car, whatever he's missing, you have to give him what he needs. But again, the Rambam says if a guy is knocking door to door, you don't have to give him a big amount.
So how he has to collect the money?
He's collecting the money, going down door to door.
So he says how many doors he can go. It's not so easy.
You're right. You're 100% right.
You know, I mean, maybe he budged the guy. He gave the Baal Tzedakah, he wants to give $10, but the Ani, he budged him to give $20.
Yeah.
So this guy has to finish it faster. Especially nowadays, $1, $2 doesn't.
Now we're the
go.
same. And I just want to conclude with two more halachas. Inflation. So the minimum obligation you have to give someone is, if someone comes over to you, minimum obligation you have to give them a pruta, a nickel, a dime, whatever. And so the guy needs tzedakah for, if you're saying he needs money for Shabbos, so so if he's knocking at everyone's door, you don't have to be the one to satisfy everything, because he is not just knocking on your door. All right. Any questions, comments?
Why Kadosh Baruch Hu did poor and rich?
Huh? So I want to tell you something amazing I just heard recently.
Huh?
I want to tell you something unbelievable I just heard recently. Tunas Rufus asked Rabbi Akiva this question, right? And Rabbi Akiva said, to save them from the judgment of hell. They should suffer in this world, shouldn't go to hell. That's a simple answer. Rabbi Shatai Savatitsky, he said, you know what it means? I asked him the source, he didn't know the source. But he said he remembers hearing this. It doesn't mean to save the poor person from hell. It's to save the rich person from hell. Not the hell of the next world, the hell of this world. You give tzedakah, until you give tzedakah, you just think about yourself, that's hell. You start thinking of someone else and give another person, you're now out of the hell of just being in your own zone.
I heard Hasidim, it's a big mitzvah to give tzedakah, and you have poor people, you have rich people, and Hasidim used to loan money to each other.
Right.
Just to fulfill the mitzvah.
Right. Story of the Reb Marash, famous to Reb Marash. Reb Marash once asked that they should call. I'm sorry, it wasn't Reb Marash. It wasn't Reb Marash. I'm sorry. It wasn't Reb Marash. It was the Tzemach Tzedakah. Tzemach Tzedakah had 600,000 chassidim. Tzemach Tzedakah had the most chassidim at time Tzemach Tzedakah. And he asked if someone could call for him Rabbi Yosef, the shopkeeper. The previous Shabbos had the story. And Yosef, the shopkeeper comes, like no one heard of Yosef, the shopkeeper, but he comes. What did Yosef, the shopkeeper do? So Yosef, the shopkeeper, when he would do what Ami was saying, he would borrow from money from Yankel, he would lend the Shemar, not because they need the money, but to the mitzvah of lending money. By the way, you have to be careful how you do it, because the Shulchan Aruch says you're not allowed to borrow money in order that another person will lend you money later. You can't say, I'm going to borrow money from now, so you'll lend me money later. It's a question of ribbis. Even if it's the same amount of money, it's not so simple. But that's what they would do in those days. They would borrow money, and in order just to the mitzvah of lending money. So the Reb Marash asked his father, why did he want to see him? So this chassid, I don't know the words he said, but this was the idea. He didn't understand anything that the Tzemach Tzedakah would say. He couldn't understand the Maimonides. But he could understand the psukim, and he could understand the midrashim. So the Tzemach Tzedakah wants to mention the medrash, says in Sefer HaBoyer, that when Hashem, time of Avram Avinu, the attribute of chesed said to Hashem, since Avram Avinu was born, I have nothing to do. Avram Avinu is taking over all the chesed. He's channeling all your chesed to the world. He is serving as your conduit for kindness. So Hashem, so the Tzemach Tzedakah told Marash that in this person, in this Rabbi Yosef, the shopkeeper, he could see the light of Midas HaChesed. The light of Chesed Atzilus was shining from Rabbi Yosef, the shopkeeper.